Welcome back to the Automation Podcast. My name is Shawn Tierney from Insights in Automation, and this week on the show, I meet back up with John DeTellem of Siemens to learn about using libraries inside of TIA Portal. And Siemens also sponsored this episode, so it's going to be completely ad-free and public, so everybody can have access to it. Now, with that said, some of you may be wondering, Shawn, didn't you do Siemens last week? And I know I always try to mix up the vendors, so we're not doing the same vendor back to back. But this was the only episode I had recorded that I could release this week. I didn't want to skip another week. So here we are. That said, I do have meetings with several vendors lined up over the next 2 weeks. And if you're talking to your vendor, encourage them to get in contact with me. They can call me, they can email me, they can get me on LinkedIn. It's very time consuming, guys. It is very time consuming trying to get all these guys to, reaching out to them and trying to get them on the show. So if you know somebody who you think would be a good fit, please put in a good word for us. And with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into this week's episode of the Automation Podcast. John, thank you for coming back on the show. I'm excited to learn about libraries. Before we jump into your presentation and start talking about these features, could you first introduce yourself to the audience? I know you've been on several times, but just quickly, for those, maybe this is the first episode they're watching, could you just quickly introduce yourself, and then we can jump right into the content?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, John DeTellem, fundamentally the TI Portal engineering software product marketing manager here out of Alpharetta, Georgia, fundamentally representing the USA and supporting our solution partners, our distributors, and our customers when it comes to anything related to the engineering software.
Excellent. And we're going to talk about libraries today?
Yeah, I thought we'd keep it simple. You kind of brought up a library that you found in one of your updates that was available online, and I thought I'd give like a little real simple overview of how libraries work in the engineering software when it comes to automation components, and introduce that library that you found online.
Excellent. I appreciate that because I haven't had a chance to play with them. So this is going to be helpful, not only for the audience, but for me as well.
So fundamentally, we're working in the engineering framework known as the TI Portal for engineering the architecture for the automation solution, of course, the PLCs, the I/O, the HMIs, motion control, safety, and those components. In our framework, of course, that comprises of the Step 7 component that's installed with the TI Portal for the PLCs, the WinCC for the HMIs. Unified is our current and our future going forward version. And then we've got Synamics for start drive, motion control, and the guys there that help you get started with some of the stuff in the Simicode and that clickety clack technology that we have on the control cabinet is all part of this one common framework. And as you mentioned, one of the keys to efficient engineering is standardized reusable library components, library objects. I've been doing it for my entire career, is providing a reference of what we want you to do when you implement a PLC block, an HMI screen, a drive configuration, basically ensuring that there's reusable known code that gets applied over and over again that provides the best path forward for machine design for the purposes of using something that we know that works. Fits in that whole concept of efficient, reliable engineering. So here's the framework. Most of your users are familiar with what it looks like. And I kind of wanted to start from a blank project, kind of step through some of the perspectives when it comes to creating the library. Where's the library come from and what can be put in the library? So I started here, of course, on my brand new computer. I only have TI Portal V19. And of course, I set myself up for core latest and greatest PLC. So I set a profile in my hardware catalog on the right hand side of the screen. And this is a blank project, no PLCs, no I/O, no devices. And then I've got my hardware catalog on there for my basic control, which is the 1200, the mid-level distributed control, which is the ET200 SP CPUs, and then the advanced, which is the 1500, and the same form factor of the HMI. What's cool about the concept of libraries in the automation world with this engineering framework is it's scalable. So once I figure it out and I design something for that basic small simple machine is scalable up to the very, very complex, all the way into what you're familiar with is the VPLC, the virtual PLC that got released last year. That's same programming structure as the 1500. It's going to have the same HMI unified. So all of these library concepts apply all the way from that 1200 all the way up to the most complex PLC and HMI. So our first step I did is I just built up an architecture, a hardware from that catalog. And you can see as I go from the left to the right, or from the top to the bottom, I did basic control, which is what you have in your lab there for your workstations for your students. The 1200 as a basic controller with safety, the unified basic panel sat on that. And then I go mid-level with the ET200 SP controller, and then the unified comfort panel for the mid-level. And then on the advanced end, on the right-hand side, I've got my SM 1500, 15 PLC with safety, and the PC-based, which is also WinCC unified as a runtime. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see my libraries. Have you worked in Project Library or the Global Library in the past, Shawn? Is that familiar?
Not much with either of these.
Yeah, a lot of people, customer I talked today, everything is in his reference project instead of in his libraries. So that's why I wanted to do this a little bit today different, is just make sure I start in the libraries. So guess what the Project Library is all about? What is different that is unique in the Project Library compared to the Global Library, Shawn?
It's available to all projects. You don't have to open a project and cut something out or rename the project to start as a starting point.
No. Good try. Project Library is the library that's for this project. So
okay.
Yep, project for this library. So, I mean, that's a great perspective, the fact that you assumed that right from the beginning. And that gives me an opportunity to give some feedback to clarifying that a little bit better on there. But no, the project library are objects and components that are going to float with this project. Anytime I archive this project, anytime I zip up this project or hand it over to the machine or the machine builder or the engineer or the end user, the objects that are in the project library are going to stay with the project and stay with this specific project. And the reason you'll see this when we get to a little bit later is that once I have a faceplate or a type of motor control in my project library, that's my master element for all of the instances of it in all the PLCs, basic PLC, advanced PLC. So if I have a robot control in every one of them, I have a reference of that UDT or that faceplate or that motor control that's in one place. And that one place that's going to be is in this project library. So that's the project library. The global library is what you described. The global library is global access. It's a file or a folder that is going to be basically available to everyone and anyone. And we actually have access to it globally. So those are the two key things. Now, what is another key thing to realize is that libraries can be built off of hardware components. So I can do a drag and drop from this hardware page, or they can be built up from program elements. So fundamentally, anything that I want to establish as a standard could become part of the library. It could be this basic controller and this basic HMI. It could be a focus of a library, meaning this is the standard devices that I want to build into the library. So this is what it looks like. I kind of broke it out to give an opportunity to explain what we just did. Again, the project library is going to contain elements that are always going to be with the project. So let's say I make a backup of the PLC today. I could put it in that master copy, and it's going to be part of that project library. And then maybe I put a date, April 18th on it. And then 3 weeks from now, I come back and I'm working in that PLC and I discover I really messed up things over the last few weeks. Because I made a master copy of it in the project library, I could pull it back. I mean, that's not necessarily what we want with version management, but some people, it's just making a copy or a paste. That's an example why you might carry it with the project. But if that PLC contains some significant setup and some really good baseline of what I want that basic PLC to have on it, then I put it in the global library And then I share this global library with the rest of the team. And the global library is just a folder structure. It's just a file. Could be on my computer, could be on the file server. It could be a zip file that I email to you that contains these elements. That's how simple that is.
Okay.
So it's really fundamentally really simple. They're elements and objects, any component that you can drag and drop, select with your mouse from hardware to program blocks, PLCs, HMIs, drives, safety, motion control, Simicode, smart motor control, starter, and the ET200SP. Any one of those elements that you've configured and designed to a certain way can be dragged and dropped and put into a project library or put into a global library. So here, I continue to kind of show that drag and drop from my project file that I created down to the global library so everyone has access to. So a hardware device can be saved to that. I can also open a reference project. Have you ever opened a reference project in TI Portal, Shawn?
No, I haven't.
This is another quick, nice little simple tool that kind of a lot of people aren't aware of is, whereas here on this view, I have my project tree that is all the devices in my current project. If I go up here to view and turn on reference project, there will be another palette that shows up here that's known as the reference project. And it'll open up as read only. This could be my master project, or it could be the last project that I did implement for a real machine. And I can drag any component that I can click and select out of the reference project, either into my project, or I could drag it out to the library. It's all drag and drop with my mouse. So in this screen, what I also did is I opened up some of the program elements. So you can see that in my program blocks, I've got a function block for the in-feed conveyor, one for the robot control. I've got a couple UDTs, user-defined data types for interfacing that conveyor to some control or the HMI faceplate. And in this case, I can drag those and make a master copy. So this could be the first step of building up a library, is just making a simple basic copy. And when it resides here as a copy, this is just a copy at the moment in time that I copied it over here. You don't really see any revision control or any linking of it back to this project instance where it might exist in the project. So if I modify the in-feed conveyor here in my project, it's not going to update to this instance over here. It's just a master copy taken in time. And that might be our first steps of evolving our library, is basically just making some master copies and deploying those into our global library. So here, what I want to do is drag these master copies down here to my global library. And again, it's just simply the mouse use of selecting the objects and dragging them down there. And then once I make the save on the global library, then they're rolled into this DeTellem global library that everybody has access to.
And I want to ask you a question. Can I rename them when they're in the library?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, you can start to give them more meaningful names and descriptions inside the libraries, so that you can actually group them too, and they become a group. I didn't do that because I thought that was a little bit too much to get into right now. Right now, I just wanted to show the different things. But yeah, you can go in here and rename them.
Yeah, because I want to put a version there, like I don't know, or a date, like most people do when they're saving their, edits to a PLC program. You put something in there to let you know, hey, this is a snapshot of something I was working on. I think it's good, and I want to put a version number or date on it, just so if I improve it in the future, I can drag in the new one, and the old one will be unique and still there.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. All right. Next, I want to highlight the concept of doing versioning, like you just mentioned. So that's what we do in the types. A type is fundamentally versioning it in the library instead of the project. And that's where it gets into more masterful control of keeping track and managing a version of the library. And fundamentally what's happening here is, instead of it being edited or controlled or changed here in the project tree, you'll see a little icon over the top of it, that black diamond.
Mhm.
And And there indicates that this element in my project tree is actually a typed element that is managed centrally in my project library.
Now, if I change it in the library, it will change in my program?
Correct. Through a step when you select it. Yes. This is a whole nother opportunity for a deep dive, is how that works. But yes, this is version 0.0.1. When I want to make a change to that version, I'll go into an edit mode of that version and a release and test version of that component in the project library. And then I have an opportunity to deploy it to the project and test it and use it. And I have an opportunity to roll it back if I don't like it.
Oh, that's good.
So the type library functionality is another opportunity for you and I to get together and dig deeper into a couple of the scenarios there. But that's where you would go to really become managing a library that you trust has elementary version control. And where this is most important is faceplates for the HMIs and UDTs that are common between the PLC and the HMI. So the key thing about once I've evolved myself out of master copies into putting these program elements into types, not everything falls into a type because the editor for the not all objects are in there. So hardware devices and parameter lists, they're generally just master copies. But program code, UDTs, HMI faceplates, and a few other things in HMIs are edited in the project library. So once I get it where I have created these usable, reusable code, and I want to deploy them to you or to the other guys on our team, then I've got to just deploy them to the types in the global library and do a save so that they're available.
And you said that could be a network share?
Yeah, it could be a network share or file share, or nowadays everybody's connected to the cloud through OneDrive or something anyway. So, but yeah, it's fundamentally in the case that we're working together to build the library. We're all in a common workspace for engineering. We see that a lot for our users in the world of design and engineering. They're collaborative engineering these things together anyway. So at the same time, I'm doing my automation, I'm doing my electrical, I'm doing my mechanical design, I'm doing a piece of it, another guy's doing a piece of it. Here, we're also tied together where we're evolving the control element for that conveyor or that robot or that main line so that it's all part of our global library. Pretty simple?
Yeah, I want to play with it now.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. I think what confused me on the project library is it's on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And other software I use, a lot of other software, the libraries that are part of the project file are in the left-hand side with the project tree. So that's the one thing that threw me. But now that you've explained it, everything except the types, I think I really got a good handle on. And we have a NAS here. I may even try to set up a global library on the NAS. So when we have students come in to the office to do a sit-down in-person training, we can have them, play with this feature by grabbing something out of that library, grabbing the widget machine or the gadget machine or the stamper or whatever it is.
Absolutely. That's the best way to do it. Start building, and then as a part of the labs, because it is simple. And it is great that you mentioned the perspective of the fact that where other libraries are, because libraries are a part of almost every software tool. Sure. Everybody talks about libraries, and then there becomes that general understanding of where it is, what it is, and how it works. And not everybody does it the same way. And that's why it's kind of important that, like, for your sessions and the work that you do in your online course or your soon-to-be face-to-face courses is roll this in so people can say, because a lot of people need to do this, is themselves, where they're bridging in an understanding of how to build up the library and then how to use it or pull from it.
I think a lot of people are just doing the old sneaker net replacement where they just had a shared folder and they just kind of throw stuff in there and keep, like I said earlier, just keep revving it or putting a new date on it. And this makes it a lot easier because you're doing it inside of the software, just like you would use. Most HMIs have a library feature or a faceplate feature. And people use that extensively, but a lot of the programming software I've used like I couldn't tell you it's either an add-on or an extra course, or it's just really, really complicated. You can't just look at it and say, hey, this is intuitive. But now that you've showed me this, I can definitely say this seems pretty intuitive. That's why I
Yeah,
want to get my hands on it. But yeah, so it's just you have a project library that's part of the project itself, and then you have a global library, which is either on your computer or on a file share somewhere on a server, and that's how you can share it with other people in the office.
absolutely. Yep. Yep. And then what I did here is there is a way to show this detail in the project tree where the type is, what its name, what its version is, what the default version is in case you're running with not the current version of it. It'll show up here.
Hmm.
So you go up here and you turn on that stuff. And then after you've become more fluent with the mouse and the keyboard, you can right mouse click on any one of the objects like you asked earlier, and you can rename it, export the text, import the text for language change,
Oh, okay.
and then update the version down to the library or into the project. This is what you asked about earlier. So it's all context menu, right mouse click. So the tools
Excellent.
are there.
Yep.
Yep.
And if
Cool.
anybody in the audience does not know how to right click, you're fired. We seem
Honestly,
to have no, we have a very high end audience. These guys are typically above my level, so they better all know how to right click. I love that. Speaking of the audience, if any of you guys are using this, I'd love to get you come on the show, even if it's a shorter show, like a tech tips or something, and tell us how you're using this, because I can
yeah.
think of a lot of ways that this could be deployed right now. But
Yep.
go ahead, John. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's an absolute. I mean, I think it'd be kind of great if you had like a segment that was on just fundamentally on libraries, and challenging the audience and all of us to be more fluent on it, to publish more libraries, and to realize how simple it is.
Yeah,
So,
I'd like to get the morning show back to the point where we're doing little snippets of tech tips, and I'd love it to have those come in from customers, and customers are users in my case, people out in the audience who, hey, give me 5 minutes on the show, and we can pre-record it. But go ahead, let me turn it back to you.
absolutely. So that was how the library is built up. I kind of want to just show and explain that as a first step is go through that whole scenario of how the hardware components of the automation devices, PLC, HMIs, or whatever, and the program elements that exist within there, whether it's a program block or a safety block or a UDT or anything, or a parameter in the drive or a technology object of motion, anything that you can click on and drag it, that little element of control can be dragged over to the libraries and dragged into another project. In the first steps of today's presentation, what I did is I selected this little icon for open new library, and I created, of course, the DeTellem global standards for today. But the users and what your objective is, hey, I want to just use a global library and see what is in there that I can reuse for doing basic control, basic process control, right? So in the global libraries, in my TI portal framework, and again, global libraries and project libraries are built into the TI portal. I always have been. It's not an add-on. It's free. It comes with it. So here I go and I select this icon, open library, and then I just browse. This little dialog comes up here. And in my case, I looked at my local PC, but you can go to the network. A lot of times you download something from the internet,
Mm-hmm.
from a tech support site or a third party. It could be a third party company that has written a library that works inside the Siemens so that you can easily interface their technology into the program
Okay.
control of the
Yep.
Siemens.
Yep.
There's a plethora of libraries that I've downloaded from other companies that have written their code inside the Siemens automation so that their devices can be implemented. There's two types that I can browse to. It's the library file, which you'll see as a automation library file, and then the version is, in this case, the one I downloaded was version 18.
Okay.
For TI Portal version 18.
Sure.
And I can also open a zipped or a compressed, just like the
Okay. That's
TI
what the
Portal.
Z is. So
Yep,
.zal
yep,
19, for instance.
exactly. Yep, zip. automation license file. And you see I can go all the way back to V11 or V12. I think I can open one of these libraries. Now, you got to be aware that there's some risk and some testing that needs to be done at the further back that you go as you update a library. It's all part of the update process you do with any element or component. You kind of got to verify that it works in the new version, in the new world. So, but for the most part, our objective is to support compatibility going forward into V19. So I can open these older versions and step into it. So again, AL, Automation Library version, is the version of TI Portal that was saved as. Z is the zipped version, and you just select open. The other thing is it's been decided that if you're open on a global library and you're a general user, it's going to open it as read-only, so that you're reading it and taking from the library. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you don't want to edit it if it's, especially if you get code from somebody who makes a product that works with your stuff and it's, massages the data. You don't want to edit that by accident. So yeah, read only would make sense.
Okay. Now all you do is hit this checkbox and it'll open up as non-read only.
Yep.
Some libraries can be saved as read only. So
Okay.
it is possible that you decide when you write your library that nobody can make changes, and it is read only by default. So there is that option as well. All right, so that library that I just showed you that I was opening was actually on our Siemens online support site, and it's a whole suite of basic controls. They're giving these things little 3-letter acronyms. I noticed, so LBC, Library of Basic Controls. And it was recently updated, as you notice in your notifications that you got from your support site this year in January. But there's a whole suite of elements in this. And it is based on the latest and greatest WinCC Unified. And it was based on TI Portal Update 3, which was last October. And there's documentation. There's a really nice screencast on the support site. Here's the support number. You can put the link on this podcast thing and it'll be available there. But I just downloaded this library, LBC, to my computer, and that's what I opened up. And of course, I'm going to bring it into V19. I could tell from the support site that it didn't really call out that the elements were written for V18 only, tested or anything specific. So I felt a little bit of confidence in being able to upgrade it and test it in my V19. So that's what I decided to do. So again, if I have some of my older global libraries for some of the labs that I do for training, I always upgrade them, and then I run through the process of validating that the element works in the new environment. And if it needs to be, then I publish it as a new version 19 because of the updates that I had to do to the library. So that's just a key thing to be aware of in the world, is what version of the software, what version of the hardware, what version of the library are you applying, and ensuring that there's not some thing that needs to be upgraded and revalidated. In this case, I hit upgrade and I successfully upgraded it into my library. So you see here on the right, I did do it as read only. It has the details of its version 2.0. Underscore V19, it did that automatically. So it didn't change the V18, but it updated and created a new one V18.
How do you know that it's read only? Is it kind of grayed out?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
The overtone gray. Again, I grew up in Germany, 2011, 2009 on usability, TI Portal. So a lot of these things are naturally ingrained into my eye set, and I see it. But as you mentioned, not the rest of the audience understands it. But yeah, that was one of the decisions we did in the usability was the objects here that are read-write are in the palette, visually nice and clean. But anytime that an element is read-only, they do this type over gray shading give it
Yeah,
that.
it's like a gray highlight to the unit instead of
Yep.
being grayed out. It's gray highlight.
Yep.
But it
Yep.
it kind of makes sense. I mean, I guessed it. So
Again, so here in my TI Portal project, I want to highlight that there is a version of the TI Portal V19 that I'm working in because that's latest and greatest. But I understand there's customers that are at V18, V17 and doing stuff, and that's why a lot of our libraries are published at as well, V17 and V18, so that you can't take a library that once it goes to V19 into a V18 or V17. So you'll see multiple versions posted online for a lot of these libraries that go back to V17 and V14. The other thing is what device is in the project. In my project, I have a current latest and greatest 1514 and a unified comfort. Other projects might have a different version hardware PLC. And because we don't make you upgrade the version, they might be at a 2.5 or a version 16. Just because I use V19, upgrade the project, there's still a step for those older projects once they've been upgraded to upgrade the hardware to a new version. If I so desire, if I want to make that step, if I need the functionality, and as well, I can decide when I upgrade the HMI's version to the current version. Gives you some flexibility on how you step in when you make a migration to determine whether it all comes together at the end. Does that make sense?
yeah, just because you're using a 19 editor does not mean you want to rev the hardware in the project. I'm with you.
Exactly. Yep. If I got a machine that is pretty much running and I'm just testing some things in V19, I'm not going to touch the hardware yet. I'm going to start with the V19, run through some things, test it, and then I might start with the HMI and upgrade that to the latest version. And then once I have confidence that I'm there, I'll do the PLC. But there's some nice benefit in the flexibility of deciding where on your project timeline do you make these steps to upgrade everything. But it's a very important thing to realize when you're mixing library elements that are PLC or HMI. What version are they compatible within? Just a thing that you kind of just want to make sure you put in your mindset that when I apply a library, what version was it released on, and what version are the components that are in my project?
Yeah, especially for the HMI side, you guys have been adding a lot of features every release. So
Yes.
you may have a newer, like let's say an 18, update 3 library, but that's not going to work in maybe one of the original like V16 comfort panels,
Yep.
um, unified comfort panels, I should say. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The features get added too, especially HMI's features get added, and hardware PLCs as well, all the time. So you got to be cognizant of that.
Yep. Absolutely. So here's the other library that you sent me. Hey, this is cool. It's the library of basic processes. So this is a little bit more advanced than the basic control that we saw in the previous one. So these are a little bit more PLC and HMI centric for kind of like what you mentioned, doing a little bit of tank control or other process type applications, process control in my automation perspective, and applying these common faceplates with these common control blocks and a whole lot of these analog things. So
Yeah, just
basically, it
go ahead.
gives you what you asked, put some process control in my PLC.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I just I'm looking at this. If anybody's listening and not watching, I mean, on the left-hand side, we see these beautiful faceplates, and we see for an HMI, and then we see the blocks, right? And on the right-hand side, we have a list, and some of the things, these are things that you're going to want, like the simple motor block, which it's just you can write your own code, but it's good to have that because it ties into a faceplate, number one. But number
Yep.
two, those blocks typically have extra things that you don't want to have to code. But then there's like a motor with two speeds and two directions, speed control motor, switching analog values, interlock up to 8 signals, continuous PID, a difference counter, an integrating counter. So this is stuff that you can write yourself, but having these blocks right from the vendor can save you, I mean, hours, weeks, and then if
months.
you're using it, right? Let's say you're using well, let me just pick one here, the pulse counter, the Control P, right? If I'm using that, right? Then if everybody's using that, all the engineers are using that, it's a standard, right? Saves us time on the HMI side or the SCADA side, but it also saves us time because we all know what this thing does. It's not like everybody's written their own, a pulse counter, right, from scratch. So that's when I saw these, I'm like, I think this is what this is. Now this one that we're looking at, the basic processes that we're talking about right now is tested and designed for 17. So even if
Yeah.
you're using 17, you can use this. So I just think this is phenomenal. This is something I definitely want to add to my course on the S7, but in with the in-person students as well. But yeah, I'm glad we're looking at this because this is exactly what I thought it might be.
Yep, exactly. And this one is specifically saying, hey, that our soup department, our support site that's published this has specifically released it. This was in February, and the target was around V17 to bring it up to unified. So they started with what was reasonably possible to do with the concept of the faceplates and the control blocks and the PLC with the new generation of the WinCC Unified. And they released it for the V17 because that's where they kind of want to start as a baseline and make that available for the general user that might still be at V17. And then, of course, it does spell out tested and designed. Uh, I, I, I didn't try to upgrade this into V19 um, because I wasn't feeling the need to do it for today. What I personally would do would start in V17 first and develop and ensure that I have the functionality that I want and what objects I want. And then I would make the migration is how I would do this. And then the other thing that I would do is find out from the guys that released this, what are the timeline, the roadmap for the tested and designed released version that is planned for V18 and V19 and V20. So it should be pretty fast on the other two things.
I want to ask you a question, and knowing the differences between the 1500 and the 1200, is this designed just for the 1500? I don't see it anywhere on there.
Yeah, Shawn. So right here in the actual tech note, you can see that it is the basic processes for Unified. Like I said, it evolved from the previous versions. So the previous versions were based on the other WinCC Comfort Advanced Professional. And unlike the other tech note that spelled out the hardware, this one only spells out step 7 basic, which is the 1200 or
Yeah.
professional.
All right, that's good to see that.
Yep. So it should be fundamentally supporting. And here's a demo project. That's another thing too. It's nice if not only do they give you the library file, but in some cases they've used or tested them in a demo project. And
Nice.
it's nice to get the demo project.
Yeah, yeah.
And there is some training on here. So if you want to get deeper into some training. Okay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Good questions, Shawn. So yeah, let's get started. I mean, or go ahead and get started. I think now that you have the basis of some of this other stuff, there's a couple more things that I wanted to highlight that came out. You mentioned it as well, but another step is in my global library. Rather than me writing to it and then you writing to it, you can check it into our project server, multi-user server, and it will do check-in, check-out, and revision tracking. The interesting thing that you mentioned in the very beginning is how do I manage the revision and tracking of what I changed? Do it with our project server multi-user. All you have to do is take that global library, select it, and then check it into the global server.
So what this gives you, this is a purchasable add-on product that will give you this check-in, check-out, multi-user feature that is more above and beyond just having a bunch of files in a folder.
Absolutely. And this is what it looks like. I made a screenshot. So it gives you these little flags when I edit it. And then I can check it in, check it out. And it basically verifies that I'm working on it and not you. And there's also a nice compare editor. A lot of users think of the compare editor for a PLC block, online, offline, or offline, offline,
Hmm.
main OB1 to OB1. But actually, if somebody took my standard library of control objects and edited it, might want to go in there and see what got changed in it. This was a V18 feature in the libraries. So showing the support for the concept of more and more folks out there are using libraries. And that's kind of the roll up. Like I said, I'm kind of excited to see what we can do on subsequent sessions with the libraries.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. That makes a lot more sense to me now.
You can also get more into Unified, the HMI side of it, where you get a better understanding of Unified. We have an academy. I just Googled this on the internet, the ability to get into Unified. And you can also get into a 21-day trial of TI Portal in the cloud and play around in this environment, or reach out to me and get a 31-day trial, and you can actually do downloads to actual hardware. It's a nice way to kind of get into doing this stuff without necessarily having to do any kind of installations. So I wanted to throw those two new things out there today. And that's it, Shawn.
Well, John, thank you again for coming on the show. I feel a lot smarter now than I did before we started. So I really appreciate you taking us and walking us through that. And for anybody listening, the video edition of the show is always available. So even if you're on like a Spotify or an Apple or a Google, you can always jump back over to either theautomationblog.com or any of the video services like YouTube and catch the video replay. And with that, John, anything else to cover?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Shawn.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I want to thank John DeTellem for coming back on the show to show us how to use libraries inside a TIA portal. I thought the description was good, the slides were good, and I'm looking forward to trying this out next time I have a chance. I also like that he included those libraries of objects that are available on the SIOS site, so I really want to try some of those out as well. But with that said, if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like, a sub, and a share. It's not hyperbole to say that that is the fuel that keeps this show on the air and coming back week after week. If you're out there watching it and liking it and sharing it, that means we have an audience and we should keep producing it. And it does, it's time consuming to put it together. So I hope you guys are listening and enjoying the show. With that said, if you want to get in contact with me for any reason, you can always get me over at LinkedIn. You'll find me over there as Mr. Shawn Tierney. That's MR, Mr. Shawn Tierney. You can also get me over at theautomationblog.com. You can hit me up on YouTube, on Locals. Those are where we have our membership sites for $2.50 a week. You can become a member and get our daily video and other extras as well. With that, I just want to wish you all an awesome day, an awesome week. I want to encourage you to be courageous and be fearless, to live happy, live healthy, and always live free. And until next time, my friends, peace.